welcome back to Enterprise AI Unlocked, the podcast where we explore how AI is reshaping the modern enterprise, one decision, one workflow, and one agent at a time. I'm your host, Paul Brzozowski, part of the founding team at Olakai-ai, the enterprise intelligence platform that helps organizations measure, govern, and scale their AI stack. Now, because we are still in the early days of this show, let me quickly remind you of our format. Each week on Enterprise AI Unlocked, we use a simple 5 questions framework to unpack how organizations are actually making AI work, not just in theory, but in practice. We talk about how companies move from experimentation to execution, how they measure value and prove ROI, how they prioritize investments, how they manage governance and risk, and where they see the next wave of impact coming from. It's the same 5 questions every guest answers, giving us a consistent lens to compare what's working across industries and when we go deeper with questions specific to each guest's unique experience. And today's episode is special because we're kicking things off with someone who's not just thinking about AI agents, he's deploying them in one of the most demanding environments imaginable, cybersecurity operations. Joining me today is Nathan Burke, Chief Marketing Officer at 7AI. Now, Nathan's company has built something fascinating, AI agents that autonomously investigate security alerts. Mind-blowing for me. And here's what caught my attention. They are seeing investigations that used to take security analysts 30 minutes to 2.5 hours, now completing in 4 minutes. Same quality, same thoroughness, but giving teams their time back. And what makes Nathan's perspective particularly interesting is this. He's watching customers go through this transformation where they stop asking, can your technology solve my problem? And start asking, where else can we apply this? That's the moment when AI moves from experimentation to transformation. Nathan, welcome to Enterprise Unlocked.
Yeah, Paul, thanks for having me. And I'm excited to dig into this because I think we're at this really interesting time where we're seeing AI agents moving from science fiction, something in the future, to production reality today. And I'm happy to talk about what I'm seeing firsthand.
Likewise, I'm also here to learn. I have been looking forward to this show and this episode. I know we talked a little bit about it in the past, so I truly appreciate you being here and making the time for us, the audience, indeed. So, Nathan, before we jump into our 5 questions framework that I promised to the audience, I want to paint a picture for everyone. When you say 7AI deploys autonomous security agents, what does that actually look like in practice? Walk us through what happens when a security alert comes in.
Yeah, great. So whenever I'm talking about AI agents or trying to explain AI agents in general, I think it's first important to start with the work you want done rather than talking about the feature, function, speed, all of that stuff. So I'm going to start with an example and then I'll work back. So one example I like to give that I think all of the audience listening and watching has experienced is a user reported phishing email. So you've all got an email before and you're saying, you know what, this is, I don't know. And you click the button that says report, right? And you've done that before, but the question is what happens next? So until recently, what happens next is that goes to a human, likely in the form of a ticket. And now that person has to go investigate it. So what do? Right? So first they go and they get the email and they read it and they're saying, does it say, I want you to go to Walmart and get a gift card? So they're looking at aggressive language. They're looking at that sort of thing. And then they're saying, okay, are there links in the email? And if there's a link, is that something that I have a tool for to see if that's known bad? And then they say, okay, there's an attachment there. And then they go to a sandbox and they detonate it. And so in all of that, there's just so many steps and a lot of time. And then not only is this thing good or bad? Well, wait a second. Did the user actually click that link and give credentials, or did they download that file and they've got a malicious process on their machine now? And so when you think about all of that, really 2 things are evident. First, it's taking a lot of time. I'm going to different tools. I'm searching for new leads. I'm writing queries. I'm then going to a different system, a different person, asking someone a question. And all of that together, like you said, it can take half an hour, it can take 2 hours, it can take more because we're jumping to all these different tools. And so most of the time, 70% of the time, it's nothing, right? It's false positive. It doesn't matter. Think about spending 70% of your time in a day doing work that turns out to be nothing in the end. And then the second piece of it, this is not why people get into cybersecurity. When you think about cybersecurity, I bet if you close your eyes right now and just think the word cybersecurity, you're picturing this big dark room with huge monitors on the wall, and you've got these super smart people in a room doing this like crazy stuff and hunting down the bad guys. And that's what you think of. But really, you're spending your time doing all this manual repetitive work. This is stuff that has to be done. We'll talk about this in a little bit anyway, but we think of all this stuff as being really non-human work. This is stuff that needs to be done, but we don't need people to do that. So now think of all of that work that people are doing, and now say, instead of me handing that to a person, we're using AI agents to do it. Now, before I get into AI agents, let me just explain what our definition is. To us, an AI agent is a small piece of LLM in the cloud that has a mission, the tasks we're asking it to perform. It's got access to tools to be able to ask those questions, get answers, and then it has the ability to reason and come to a conclusion. And then we build a lot of them. So every step I just went through, checking a link, we have an agent that exists only to check links and determine, is this malicious given the context of your environment? We have an agent that will look at file attachments, and it has access to a sandbox. So think of all of these as being single agents all along that entire chain of the work that needs to be done. And take the phishing email, take endpoint, take cloud, any number of things that happen in security operations. We're then using agents to handle that end-to-end work and then hand to a person, either this is what's risky that you need to pay attention to, or giving them the full determination all the way to conclusions. We're using AI agents to take a lot of this manual repetitive work away and ultimately give the analysts back time so they can do the things that are super cool, why they got into cybersecurity in the first place.
Right. You're like looking at those multiple screens and finding the bad guys rather than responding to phishing emails. I'm going to stick to that, by the way, Nathan. I think that's exactly what the job is all about. All seriousness, that's fascinating. So you have these specialized agents working in parallel rather than one generalist agent trying to do everything, like a small army out there.
That's right.
All right. Well, now, you mentioned something in our prep that I want to explore a little bit further. You said when security teams first see what your agents can do, the initial reaction is often, this can't be real. Tell me about that moment. What's happening when skepticism shifts to belief?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you the answer first, and then I'm going to give you a longer story to get there. So in anything, you have to build the trust that this is actually doing what it says it can do. You know, there's a lot of examples of guys like me that have promised things that don't actually deliver. And so there's that initial skepticism because there's a lot of noise right now around AI and AI agents specifically. And so it's really a question of, okay, great, there's a lot of promise out there. Does it work? But I think what's interesting about this moment and about AI agents, not just in security, but in general, is think about the way that we traditionally buy products in the enterprise, right? So we start with a problem or a challenge. And I'm going to give the example I always give, which is, all right, I'm at a company and I need something that allows my employees to submit expense reports and get them approved, right? How do we generally do that? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some Google searches, and I find there's this expense management platform category, and then I'm going to go look at options, and then I'll go to their websites, and then I'll probably do a bunch of demos, and then I'll pick a couple, and I'll do a POC, and then we negotiate, and we do all that. 6 months later, we end up having something in place, and we have to teach all our users how to use it. Great. So what do we just buy? We bought a process that we now implemented, and it dictates how people do work. It sure probably has some automation, and it's going to save some time and puts everything in place, but it just shifted the work. It makes some tasks marginally faster, but it didn't take the work away, right? Now I'm saying, instead of that, we have these things called AI agents. And these things are capable of doing all of that work, right? And so they're going to look at the photos I took of my receipts, and they're going to automatically upload them, OCR them, read them, put them in categories, and submit them on my behalf. And then they have access to my calendar. And they see that this happened at the Dallas dinner, and that's why I'm submitting this. And they know the difference between that and the snow globe I bought at the airport for my daughter. And so they don't submit that one. And then they access my credit card that I only use for work expenses and my Marriott account. And they do all of this. That is the difference between something that is actually doing work versus here's a new way for you people to follow a process to do the thing. So that's like a pretty big shift. And so when you're saying what I'm selling you is not a new piece of software to just do things better, faster, whatever, instead I'm saying, I've got this thing that's going to do the work you don't want your people to do. That's a pretty big bridge to cross on the trust curve. Now I'm saying, okay, well, I've got people doing it now. Can this do it as well as people? What else do I have to do to make sure? And so you're really starting to think about this differently. And I think anytime you're going from a 5 to 10 to 20% increase in whatever, speed, accuracy, doesn't really matter, to I'm going to take 80% of the stuff you don't want to do and you don't want your people to do, but still do the work. And as well, there's a lot of, I have to understand it. I have to trust it. And once you see, wait a second, this actually works, it immediately shifts to, I think I can apply this elsewhere. And I just came up with the example of an expense report, but I guarantee as you're listening to this, you can think of 50 things that you spend your time on that aren't what you want to be doing. And so that's really the change that we see. And it's really kind of a magic moment of, well, wait, can I apply it here and here? It both allows us to understand how wide we can go on the use cases and helping customers, but it also lets them think, well, wait, if I'm getting 25% back, 50% back, how much time I'm getting back, what can I do with my people now? And then that's when it gets really interesting.
I love this. And there's a few things I picked up naturally in this. We'll definitely double down a little bit as the conversation continues. But for me, what's really stuck is that you are describing the exact journey that we want to explore in this podcast. Moment when AI stops being a science experiment and becomes something you actually trust to do the real work. And for me, Nathan, I'll be honest with you, this is a mindset shift. I've been buying software for decades now. We all probably bought some. Sometimes were successful, I guess, right? But ultimately, we want to buy results. CEOs want from AI productivity. That's what I understand is happening today. And as soon as this becomes a real thing, like it solves a real problem and it can save you real time, I think this is where the mindset shift really, takes an angle. So I appreciate that. And with that, let's dive into our 5 core questions. And let's start with that exact challenge. Experimentation to execution. This is one of the framework questions that we've prepared for all the guests ahead of us. So Nathan, tell me, when deploying AI or agents, and in your case, in production, or your customers, what's been the biggest hurdle in turning early experimentation into measurable success?
In a word, it's trust. And I know we just talked about it a little bit, but let me kind of give a little more detail there. So I think when you're in cybersecurity, this is a little different from an example of an expense report, because if someone's expense report goes missing or is miscategorized, that's, it's not critical. I mean, they're annoyed that they don't get paid back quick, but still, it's not going to make the sky fall. But in cybersecurity, if you miss something, or if you're actually coming up with a determination that isn't correct, that could be the reason that you're breached, right? So the stakes are really, really high. And I think when it comes to what we're seeing at customers, first it's okay, does it actually work? Great, I get it. Now, does it work in production? Because anybody, and that's one of the benefits of AI, you can have a really slick demo, but something that is in a large, complex environment with 100,000 users is going to be very different than the slides that you show. So can it actually support my production environment? Great, now it's up and running. Okay, can I see every decision it's made? We knew that this would be a really big trust curve from the very beginning, and we very much over-index on transparency. So when I say that we have agents that are doing every step, we show it. We say, here's the agent, here's the input it received, here's the question it asked, the response it got, the determination it made, so everything is totally auditable and you can see every step along the way. I know that it works, but how do I make sure it works every time? How do I also give feedback if it does something that I don't expect it to do, or I want it to have additional context? So it really is showing not only what it's capable of, but finding a way to say, and you can give feedback, but you can also see why it's making those determinations, and getting to the point of saying, all right, this is as good or better as the people that are spending their time doing this stuff that I don't want them to do anyway. So it really is not a technical hurdle whatsoever. It's more of, I have to bring you along on the journey to make sure that you're comfortable with this. But not only that, that at any time you can jump in, see what it did, but also give feedback in case there's anything that you either don't expect or you want changed. And really presenting that all together has been the single biggest challenge to overcome, but it's happening fast.
Hey, well, that's a lot to unpack. If you think about it, the hurdle isn't building the technology. It's actually getting past that this can't be a real moment, right?
Yep.
And once you do, customers start thinking strategically about capacity rather than tactically about problems. That's a very interesting inversion of the traditional enterprise seller. So, Nathan, why won't you quickly walk us through what happens after that flip? Because that's, a fantastic story. I want to double down a little bit. When a CISO, in your case, goes from skeptical to asking, where else can we use this? What's the typical conversations like after that?
Yeah. So I think first, and maybe I'll take a step back and say this, that generally what we'll do is we'll start on like one or two use cases, right? We'll go to someone and say, all right, we've got this cool thing called AI agents. We're happy to talk at length about it, but what is the work that you're trying to accomplish? What do you want to get done? And we'll start on a couple of use cases. And instead of just doing everything all at once. So we'll do that, and then they'll come to that conclusion that I trust it, it works. All right, now let's add additional use cases. Great. So now they're saying, I want to do cloud identity. I want to move to something else. Then it really becomes the most valuable piece, which is now that I've unlocked this capacity that was spent doing things that were just manual repetitive, what can I do with that? So I think there's this term, this idea of an opportunity cost, but this is really the opportunity value, right? This is what is unlocked when you now have extra capacity on people that want to be more strategic, that want to do more high value work. And so it's not only the, what can I do more with agents, but it's also what can I do with the people that were wasting a huge percentage of their time on things that aren't high value. Now I can get to those things that are on my bucket list that I'll never get to, but now I can without adding additional headcount. And that's where the really fun conversations start. So it's less about, we have awesome AI agents, which we do, but now what do I do? Because I just unlocked all this capacity and I don't have to add more.
That is pretty fascinating. And that just resonates with me, Nathan, because that's what we try to do with our customers as well. Unlock the potential through an actual visibility measurement, right? Because once you've got that trust, to your point, Nathan, you need to prove the value. And that naturally brings me to the second question. My personal favorite question, I probably will say on every single show, it's about proving value, measurement. That's the quest I'm on with my business partner, Olakai. But here's the question, Nathan. If you had to pick one metric to prove AI's value to your board or leadership, what would it be and why?
Yeah, this is an easy one. It's time saved, right? Because first of all, you can measure everything like we do in cybersecurity. Mean time to respond, that's a lot faster. And reduction in false positives, that's also something you can measure and you can assign a value to. But what you can really assign a value to is the time saved on people. And this is even more important in cybersecurity because the reports are there's between 1 million and 3 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs in the US alone. That's a pretty big range. But in reality, it doesn't matter what number you believe. It's really hard to find good cybersecurity analysts and people that are highly skilled, right? There's just not a lot of them. And so you've got first an increase in attacks and alerts, and that's always going to happen. And then you've got a huge lack of highly skilled people to do it, whatever number you pick. So you've got those two things. So you've got these really precious resources, and you're saying, I'm lucky to have them. But also at the same time, you're saying, yet a huge percentage of their time is wasted doing the stuff I don't want them to do. And they want to be doing threat hunting. They want to be able to really upskill themselves, but they're just responding. So not only is it a metric that you can assign a dollar value to, but it is one of those metrics where it not only represents value in a product like ours, but it really is value you're already paying for that can be shifted to something else that not only is higher value for you, but also has a direct correlation with retaining that talent in a pool of people that can go across the street for another 20 grand tomorrow if they want to. So if I can only have one metric, it's that, and there's a lot I can extract from it.
Love the punch, right? I was holding to my seat. It's time saved. It's easy. I'm like, okay, because it actually makes a lot of sense. And time saved has so many dimensions, right? It might have many meanings to CISOs, CIOs, or sales leader, for instance, right? So it will have different effects as well. It's not really about efficiency only. It's about unlocking capacity for the work that actually matters. That's my, I guess, spin on what you just said. The strategic work that gets deprioritized when everyone's drowning in alerts. Convey, help me understand, Nathan. When you say investigations that took 30 minutes to 2.5 hours, take 4 minutes, what are those analysts doing with the other 26 to 146 minutes, if my math is right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And so I'm laughing because we have a podcast called Do Human Work. One of the things I always ask every CISO that we talk to is, if I had a magic wand and I could wave that wand and I could give you back 25% of your time, what would you do with it? And I've asked this 10, 12 times, however many it is by now, and everyone has an answer. And it's immediate. Everyone has this thing on their cybersecurity bucket list of the things I want to be doing, but I never get to. And then when it comes down to their team, they have so many examples. One of my favorite examples, and this really has nothing to do with 7AI directly. This was just an early story that it really stuck with me. So one of our customers is from an insurance software company. And he was telling us, and this was before he ever even saw our product, so this is before us, he is really leaning in on AI because he believes it can really transform. But also, what's more important is he wants his team to be able to upskill always. And so he started playing with AI, and he went to his team who was skeptical, and he went to one of his analysts and said, "Listen, do you want to make your bonus this year?" She's like, "What? I mean, yes. Like, what's the trick here?" And he said, "What is one thing that you're spending a huge amount of time on that you really shouldn't be, and it's something that's holding you back from doing things that you want to do?" And she said, "Okay, I've got one." He's like, "All right, I want you to spend a week and figure out how to use AI to automate that." And the thing she picked was security questionnaires. So they're getting tons of questionnaires from their vendors asking, do you have these certifications? Is my data safe? All of that stuff. And it's very repetitive. And she said, okay. A week later, she came to him and said, it's done. It's working. It's in production. And she got her bonus. And he used that example because then he went to all of his team to show, like, look what you can do with AI on these things that you don't really care about. I've got plenty of others from our podcast where when we ask that question, everyone has an answer. I want my people to be more than just responders. I want them to hunt. I want them to do things proactively. I want them to have a direct line with the rest of the business instead of being the team that just sits in the dark corner and is saying no to stuff. Everyone has that ready to go whenever we ask that question, because for too long, we've hired these people and just said, this is all you're going to do. And now we're saying, forget that. What do you want to be? Where do you want to supplement your knowledge in cybersecurity? Do you want to be a specialist? Do you say, listen, I'm doing this response stuff, but I really care about cloud. Great. Let's go do it. And I think this is something that is just totally universal. Take cybersecurity out of the picture. Go to any other function in a company and you'll find someone that is saying, we are spending all our time doing this one thing that it's got to get done, but it doesn't take a brain or creativity to do it. And this is what we're seeing in the people that we talk to. They all have an answer ready to go. And when they're able to do it, the side benefit is people want to stay longer because you're investing in them and they get to see beyond what's right in front of them.
And you give them that commodity that we all as human live with, and it's called time. So metric is time, and time is of essence. Whatever you do, whether it's family time, whether it's recording another podcast or resolving another security ticket, this is the value. And I see a huge transformation here, and it's quite powerful. So what I want to do is to repeat that for everyone. You're not just measuring how fast AI completes a task, you're measuring how much human capacity you've unlocked for higher value work. That's what I want to remember from this stage of our call. And this is where it gets a little bit more practical. Every organization, Nathan, has limited resources. You mentioned this multiple times already. And a million places they could deploy AI. right? We see this Scarlet agent ecosystem. You're building armies, not necessarily probably know that I have that agent B already deployed. So let's talk about prioritization. That's our third question on the list of 5. And it goes as, with budgets tightening and AI projects multiplying, how do you decide which initiatives deserve more investment and which should be paused or reevaluated?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think you'll see a lot of articles out there. I think there was an MIT survey that was something like 90% of agentic initiatives fail. I see that AI can be a big impact in what I do. And so I'm going to try to do everything at once. And then you just kind of spiral out of control, burn up tokens, spend a lot of money, and you haven't really figured out what you're trying to solve in the first place. And so for me, and what I've seen both personally and in customers and just in general, is start with the most painful area first with the most impact. Because one thing we hear from a lot of CISOs is it seems like every board woke up one day and just decided to ask the question, what is your AI strategy? And the real underlying answer to that is, where can I get a quick win and prove it? So to me, it's where is the pain the most acute, but also something where I have a finite understanding of this is where I want to be. I have something that I can measure against to show that it's worked. And it's something that's not going to take 3 years. So what I always think of is find that one pain point that is critical, that has a lot of value if you solve. It's something that you understand to be able to articulate that it has been solved, and it's something you can do relatively quickly. Find that one thing you want to solve, try it, go after it, know your qualification criteria and your exactly what results you want to be able to measure and report against, and start there. And then you can start doing more and more and more. But I think you've got to build that muscle because this is all new. And it's not like there's a well-defined playbook. So I'd say no matter what it is and what you're doing, find that one thing, then scope it, go after it, and then really try to spread it out and expand. Don't start by trying to do everything at once. And I think that's where people get in trouble.
Right. AI can do anything and everything. It's really up to you what it wants you to be your sidekick on. So what you're saying, Nathan, is don't start with what can AI do, start with what are we doing that humans shouldn't have to. And I guess that's a much more practical filter than trying to boil the ocean. And I'm fascinated by this concept of non-human work. I obviously prepared for this episode, for the show. We talked a little bit earlier, and it really resonates with my principles. Because at the end of the day, people are a little bit afraid of AI, and it depends how you perceive it. There's different philosophical approaches to it, and fair enough. But it's essentially it is going to happen, and AI can do a lot that just doesn't require human creativity or judgment. There's just so much, in the business, in the large business, that it just doesn't necessarily require us to take a look. How do you help organizations identify what qualifies? I think is what really matters here. Because I imagine there is work people think requires human judgment that actually doesn't. What is your perspective on this? Just elaborate a little bit on that concept for us, Nathan.
Yeah, and I think you put two really interesting concepts together. So one is just asking the question, what work do you want your people to do? Not what work needs to be done, not what is AI's place. What work do you want your people to do? And I think that's a really tough question because it feels a little loaded and it feels a little heavy. But then, okay, you have a limited amount of people and they have a limited amount of time. What do you want them to do? So I think that's one really good conversation starter to understand that. And then you layer on, and here's the work that needs to be done. But then the other point that you bring up is, what is the person's role? Is it something where you're just letting AI go and saying, we're not going to look at it? And so just taking it back to what we do, one of the big questions is around remediation, right? We find a thing and we say, all right, this is a phishing email. And that's something we can do. We can stop there. Or we can go to the next step, which is do you want the AI to actually fix the problem? Do you want it to block the email, or do you want it to delete the file, or whatever that is? Or do you want to go to the middle ground, which is I want to send that to a person who just has to hit a button? And I think part of this goes back to that trust curve. And part of that is At what point do you get to say, I just trust it and we just don't need people to do that? But I think it's really hard to go from just people to pure AI and nothing. The role of the person is in stages. And I think when we think about what we do in cybersecurity, we find a threat and there's some things that AI can just remediate. It's easy. You wouldn't need a person anyway. There's like no risk, right? But then there's other things where you're saying the AI found this suspicious. And what we always want to do is err on the side of, I don't want to say this is benign when I'm not sure. So it's suspicious, escalate to a person, but escalate to a person with all of the context, all of the conclusion, everything that the AI have come to. And so now you're thinking, instead of me as a person doing all this like data questing and all of the steps, I have the result that is in my hands, but I'm being asked, can you go just double check and make sure? And do you know something that is nuanced, contextual, that couldn't be found in what the AI has access to? So it really is that question of, what do I want those people to do? Because I think I do want the people to be able to get the results from the AI in some things. In others, just automate it. Like, let the AI go. I don't care about this. It's so low risk. So I think it's all very situational and it's all, again, pretty new. That's the kind of conversations we're having though. It's not the, is it going to work? It's where do I want to involve my people at what stage? And now it's, I want them to look at this while they're doing the proactive stuff instead of the other way around, which is you'll get to the proactive stuff when you're done responding to alerts that, by the way, are never going to stop.
Brilliant. I really zoned out listening to it. It's quite inspirational.
It's the first time I'll ever take someone that said they zoned out as a good thing, I guess.
It definitely in a positive way. Because look, I've been thinking, I was visualizing this. You paint a really good story here. And I love that you keep it practical as well, right? So let me just try to reland it for everyone. So because once you can identify that work, the ROI conversation becomes much clearer. This is what we try to achieve with our customers here as well. And we're not debating whether AI might be useful someday, right? Like, we're trying to calculate exactly how much capacity you're going to unlock. You mentioned getting wins in 7 days. That gives CISO something real to take to the board. And that's a great concept. Here at Olakai, we run those 90-day pilots that we want you to have a first-hand experience. We always starts with agentic ecosystem first. That's just the business we're in. That's the same concept, right? You guys try to get some early wins through visibility, through transparency. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, Nathan, and give CISO something real to take to the board. Same here on a little bit wider measurement and ROI message from Olakai as well. Right. So now, this is where a lot of AI initiatives really hit a wall. This is a good segue to the next question. Let's talk about governance, especially in security operations where mistakes can be catastrophic. Let's talk a little bit about that. Not the most voted question, because when we were coming up with the framework, we polled like probably 100 people total to get the top 5 questions. And I really wanted to have something about governance, risk, and control. And I'll be honest with you, I had to skew a little bit the selection process because it is just very important. So governance is becoming a huge theme, especially when you're deploying agents in production security operations. Question: how do you balance innovation with control, ensuring AI stays productive, safe, and compliant at scale, Nathan?
Yeah, this is a conversation I have a lot. And I think part of it is just because when we say AI, we're using this huge umbrella to mean a lot of different things. Using AI for security, does that mean I'm just going to ask ChatGPT, is this good or bad? And I think a lot of people think about things like hallucinations, and they're thinking about bias and that sort of thing. So first is around AI agents specifically being, this is really control through architecture rather than where each agent is very small, both in its scope and its ability to do things. And what I mean by that is, it's not like we're training the models constantly to do stuff. Instead, it's, you are an agent that has to look at a file. You have access to this tool. There's nothing to keep training on, right? You have a very specific set of questions that you have to answer at minimum to come to a conclusion. And the bias has to be towards, I don't know enough, escalate. First is that underlying principle of, we're not just asking open-ended questions. We are not a chat bot that is a person asking a question or uploading a file. Instead, It's API driven, and it's based on rules and guardrails where you can only do a very specific set of things. GPT, where you ask it a question, it's going to answer something that sounds smart, even if it doesn't make any sense at all and it really doesn't know the answer. Instead, it's, you have this one purpose in life. That's it. You have access to these tools and this data. That's it. And here are the questions you have to be able to answer, or you can say, I don't know. Right. So to me, that's like the biggest part of this question, which is, we're not saying this is an open-ended system that can just go and do anything and make stuff up. So that's the first part. The other part, and I can go into depth, but I know you don't want to do that here, is around, the idea that we're only like, there's a million different kind of architectural ways that we've made sure that this can operate in the most secure environments. And there's nothing that really can poison it because it's not getting inputs. Happy to talk about that later. I could go for an hour and a half. Nobody wants to hear me talk about that.
We'll set a additional time for that, because I'm sure there is a squad that would enjoy this.
Oh my God, there are people that love this stuff, and I'm one of them.
But I will think about maybe extra serious just because of this. But Nathan, what you're saying is AI agents can actually be more governable than human analysts because every step is visible and auditable. I can actually bring a little bit more of my own personal opinion here. Just because you don't work with humans in this case, I don't know, some people think AI agents are robots, right? But it's just one of the pictures you can paint. But for me, this just takes away a little bit of that privacy element as well, right? And then some, obviously we are all about ethical AI deployment, and especially when it comes to employees, when it comes to human privacy, super important aspect. I believe this is actually a number one thing that we always should be taking into consideration when we deploy AI in the big enterprises especially. But ultimately with agents, you walk away a little bit of that, right? And every step is visible and auditable. Tell me a little bit more about how security team that's nervous about this, what the auditability look like in practice, really. That's what I'm trying to ask you.
Yeah. And so, right, there's two parts of it. One is just like the securing and the architecture to make sure that agents do what they say they're doing. The second is exactly what you're saying, which is being able to see every step along the way, right? So when we're doing that investigation, like the phishing email I was telling you about, you can not only see, okay, this is the agent, this is its input. Let's say it's the email or a URL. This is the query it asked of the tool. This is the response it got back. So you can just copy paste them and you can just validate that this is exactly what it got back and why it came to its conclusion. So for every step along the way, and this is something that you're not going to get with humans, right? If every person documented every single step and why they came to every single conclusion, they'd be able to do like one a day, right? There's no way you could do it. So it's actually more auditable, and you can see the consistency by looking through all of the audit logs and being able to understand this is exactly why it came to that conclusion, what it accessed, how it got its conclusion, what it would do for remediation. Like every step of the way is documented in a way that it's immutable. And so it's always there. So this is something that from an audit perspective really wasn't available when using humans alone. Maybe that you can see some notes in a ticket that was closed, but you're getting vastly more data on the why than you would get with people alone that you could ever have.
What I'm sensing here, Nathan, and stop me if you disagree, but the governance has that potentially negative reaction to too many. But what I sense from your response to my prior question is it's rather an actual enabler that drives AI adoption. It's one of the foundations. And funny that we're coming to this conclusion because in the next episode, I'll be speaking to a serial CEO who has also deployed agents. And we touched on this in the prep as well. Let's not look at the governance as a barrier, but rather let's turn it into a positive foundation of your AI program. So I really appreciate this perspective because it just makes me feel, and I hope the audience will also, at the end of the day, agree with us, because that's a different conversation than, trust us, the AI is safe. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think just to put it pretty concisely, the issue isn't around governance. I think the ability to do governance and audits and stuff like that, it's unquestionably easier and you have a bigger corpus of data to do it. But the problem is getting past can this thing hallucinate? Can it be biased? And I think a lot of this is just the misunderstanding of an open-ended LLM and how it gets how it comes to its conclusions or gives answers versus a very well-structured architecture on agents that are very small in scope. And I think once you cross that understanding of, oh, this isn't asking ChatGPT a question, asking it the same thing in an hour and getting a different answer, this is something fundamentally different, then you can see that the output is something that is much easier to consume for audit and governance.
All right, let's look forward. We've talked about where enterprise AI is today. Let's talk a little about where it's going. Last question from the framework scope. As you look ahead, Nathan, where do you see enterprise AI creating the most tangible impact over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny that we're talking about this now because it's early innings, right? We launched our company February 5th and we've got some very large customers, but it's just the beginning. So 12 months is like a lifetime from now. I think it's been like 280 days since the day we came out of stealth. And we have very large enterprise customers in production at huge complex environments, but it's still so early. So it's one of those things where you're saying, what's going to happen in 30 years? I have no idea. But I do know that what I'm seeing is the adoption is something that I've never seen before, right? I've worked at a lot of different cybersecurity companies, and you spend a year or two building a thing in stealth, and then you start launching, and then you get some design partners, and then eventually you build more features, and then you start selling. Like, this is all happening in such a compressed time frame on our side, what we're seeing. But on the other end, we have a very large customer, DXC Technologies, Fortune 315, 120,000 employees worldwide. And so in 8 weeks, we went from initial conversation to deployment and production internally. And now they're bundling 7AI as a service offering to all of their global managed SOC customers. I've never seen anything like that. And if you told me that a year ago, I'd say you're on drugs. So I think it's really more around adoption. I think it's more around understanding where we can apply this technology. And then even better than that, I think it's trying to figure out now with this excess capacity with our people, where can we actually get them to do the things that they wanted to do in the first place that are high value for us, that are strategic. And in many cases, I think the end result is we're hoping that this extra capacity also helps us in lots of revenue generating activities throughout the business.
I love this answer, and it's very humbling, but I want to touch on something. What will happen in the next 30 years? I actually know what will happen because I've seen the Terminator movies,
Right.
But I don't know what will happen with AI in the next 12 months. But
All right.
but jokes,
Okay.
prediction isn't really that AI will make us faster at what we do. It's that AI will fundamentally redefine what we consider human work in the first place. But I want to really just, because we're coming to a close of the show, so I really want to double down on this. Give me another example, like paint the picture for the broader enterprise. What does work look like when we've eliminated all the non-human work?
You know, it's a great question and it's a fun one to think about, right? I think one of the things that's always a concern, and I'm seeing how it's transforming things myself, is how we build our teams and the nature of how we decide how we tackle the work that is to be done. I'll give a very good example of that. My last company, when I left, I had a team of 43 people globally. I now have a team of me and one other person. And as we're scaling and I'm looking at next year, I'm thinking of how many do I actually need? And part of that is because, AI helps a lot, but also to me, it's this fundamental shift from the generalist versus the specialist. In the past, the way I would have done it is I have product marketing here, I have demand gen here, I have brand here, and they're all very, very separate and they only stay in their own lane. I think what we're starting to see in larger companies as well is that we have so many specialist positions that are just kind of waiting or saying, I only do this. And to me, one of the things that AI and especially agentic AI is helping with is it's allowing people to do more broadly. And it's kind of the rise of the super generalist, which to me is someone that's very curious, that isn't saying like, I only do this one thing. And now the barrier to doing more and to doing different things, more interesting things, and to satisfy your curiosity has lowered exponentially, because now I have answers at my fingertips, but also I don't have to learn all the little things to be able to do something pretty well, to figure out if I want to do that really well. And I'm seeing that as something that within the next 12 months is you're going to see more of the ultra generalist rising in companies because they can do a lot more than just one thing. There'll be fewer individual specialist roles. And when people are worried about jobs being taken by AI, I think that's going to be the reality versus the AI is going to just completely eliminate all of marketing, all of sales, all of whatever. I think it's just going to change the way we look at it. And it's the complexion of what a job is versus the work that is to be done. It's kind of being tweaked. I wouldn't say totally reinvented, but that's something that's happening now. You can feel it. And I think it's going to be more of that than just there will be no more work anymore.
Really like that thesis. We are essentially reimagining how work gets done today. And it is exciting, and it's great to be part of that movement as well. Some people call it AI revolution. I think this is just an evolution of the human extension of our capabilities. And I'm super excited to see that. And hopefully in the next 12 months, we can have another episode, and then I'll make sure that we double check on our predictions. But with that, Nathan, this has been incredibly insightful. I really want to summarize this super quick for the audience. I think my biggest takeaway is this shift in thinking from what problems can AI solve to what work shouldn't require human creativity in the first place. That just reframe changes everything, right? Everyone listening, if you are thinking about where to deploy AI in your organization, Nathan's given us a practical filler. Look for high volume, essential work that wastes your people's potential. That's where AI agents create real transformation. And the other big insight, governance doesn't have to be a barrier. When you architect it right, AI can actually be more auditable, more transparent, and more trustworthy than traditional approaches. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Enterprise AI Unlocked. This was fabulous. And I think we've set a high bar for the conversations to come. And this is a wrap on today's episode of Enterprise AI Unlocked. If you enjoyed this conversation with Nathan Burke from 7AI, be sure to follow the podcast wherever you get your shows. In future episodes, we will continue exploring how measurement, governance, and enablement come together to turn AI innovation into measurable results. We will be talking with CIOs, founders, security leaders, and AI practitioners who are solving these challenges in real time. I'm Paul Brzozowski from the founding team at Olakai, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Thanks, Nathan.